Hello everyone. You can see behind me, you see the black walnut guitar I built back in 2010. It's actually the very first neck through guitar I've ever built. And there's been some construction issues I've had with it, and I would like to go ahead and try to correct those now. I'm not exactly sure how far I'm going to go into this build, simply because the guitar actually plays quite well, sounds excellent, and I don't know if I want to risk damaging anything. But one thing I am planning for sure to do is to change the fretboard. I also might change the finish over to a Danish oil finish, which would require me to remove the lacquer. And the reason for that is the lacquer has kind of, when the lacquer cured, it kind of shrunk down and it's kind of rough looking. So the first thing I'm going to try is to wet sand it and see if I can't get that to smoothen out. But I'm also toying around with the idea of maybe thickening the body a little. The body's a little bit thinner than I would like. And to do that, I actually have to plane off probably about a ½ inch of the back of the body and then glue some fresh wood onto it. So I'm not sure if I'm going to go that far at this point or not, but I'll show you what some of my issues are. The action on this is actually about as low as I can get, and because I don't want to take the bridge below the even plane of the body. So to get my action lower, I'm actually going to have to raise the fretboard, and you can see some of the issues I have with the fretboard from this angle. As I said before, it's the very first neck through guitar I've ever built. It's the very first neck I've ever built, and the fretwork is not very good. And I want to correct that. I've already refretted it once, and I just think it's time to put a little bit thicker of a fretboard on it. That way I can get the neck a little bit closer to the strings without having to lower my bridge anymore. I'm very particular on how I want this setup to be. Another issue I had is I cut the fretboard just a smidget too short, and if I move the tremolo, you can actually see the nut rocking back and forth because it doesn't have the support of the neck. So that's one of the things I'm going to correct. Here's a little bit different angle, and you can see what I was talking about, how when the lacquer cured, it just kind of shrunk down onto the grain of the wood. It has kind of a rough appearance. And right now, I can't make up my mind if I just want to wet sand it and make it glassy smooth again, or if I want to take this opportunity to thicken the body. I made the body a little bit too thin, but because of the bevel on the back, the rounded over edges, if I do thicken the body, I have to plane that off of there and then put fresh wood on the back. Another issue, you can see how the my tremolo access cover is fairly thick, and I'll show you why it's so thick in just a few minutes. I actually had to make it that thick on purpose because the body is so thin that I had to make room for the tremolo to move inside that cover. And that's just one of the issues I would like to correct. So, I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to adhere to it. Like I've said before, this thing plays quite well. And I would like to get the action a little bit lower. It sounds amazing because it has the Seymour Duncan 59 SH1N at the neck position, and it has a Gibson 500T at the bridge position, and so it's got a lot of has a lot of output. It's a very hot guitar, and the walnut just really gives it a very unique tone. It's one of the best sounding guitars I have. So I'm afraid to go into it too deep, but I definitely want to get some of these problem areas corrected. Another thing that I would like to correct, I recessed where the output jack sits into the body, but when I added the lacquer, it kind of raised it back up, and I would like to get that sitting flush again. The bridge sits nice and flush, you can see, so it's a nice even plane, and that's what I want to keep. But I want to get that action a little bit lower. It's not bad, but I want to get that action a little bit lower and improve this fretwork. When I built this, I built it basically in a wood shop. Didn't have any guitar experience whatsoever. And when I went for the inlays, I went to a hobby store and found a necklace, and that's what I use for the inlays. But I like the shape and the color of those inlays, and I do have enough of the necklace left over to put the exact same inlay. So I'm planning on doing that because I want to keep that look. And you can see on the frets, especially when you get closer to the back, where they're very, very flat on the top. And that is because for some reason I couldn't get the fret to seat all the way. It kept raising. And so there's a little gap. And so to level the fretboard, when I leveled the fretboard, it left them very flat. And I do not have a crowning file yet, which I might by the end of this build, because I want this to be correct. I have done some Danish oil finish on guitar necks since this build, and I really like how it turns out. One thing I'm not going to mess with, I'm not going to mess with the headstock at all. I might, however, build a new truss rod cover, probably at the exact same shape, but use more guitar appropriate screws. And since those screws have already been used, I'm afraid that there's the imprint on that truss rod cover is going to be too deep to make a change. So you can see what I was talking about, how I had to hollow out the back of the tremolo cavity cover to make room for the tremolo to actually function. So by thickening the body, I can eliminate the need for doing that, and I can make a more appropriate cover. But again, it's not something I'm not necessarily positive I'm going to do that, because this neck joint is very comfortable to play, and I just don't know if I want to mess with that or not. And plus the finish on the back of the neck, I really like. It's real smooth, it's real fast. And if I make this change, I either have to re-lacquer the whole thing and try to make it blend, or I have to take the finish off the entire guitar, except for maybe the headstock. Remove the strings now, and I'm going to do it quickly. But one thing I've seen a lot of people do that for some reason I just don't like, it may be safe, it may not, I don't know. I'm not a luthier, I just do this as a hobby. But I just don't like the idea of cutting the strings and snapping them all off at one time. But since I'm doing a complete rebuild on this, the adjustment of the truss rod is going to the truss rod will be readjusted anyhow. So I want to remove the strings at one time, but I want to do it a little bit more gradually. So to do that, I'm just going to loosen the springs on the tremolo, and let the pressure off the strings that way. Just hold that tremolo right up, and all I have to do is pop it out. Okay, the strings are off of the guitar. They're still on the tremolo. This particular tremolo I bought specifically because you don't have to cut the ball off the strings. So all I have to do is just pull the strings out the back and everything's gone. We just have the power on. once I have all the strings off the guitar, I want to go ahead and loosen this truss rod up so there's no tension on it whatsoever. Well, I'm not worried about tear out, as you can see. So all I'm doing, I'm not taking the time to heat the frets and gently prop them out. I'm just grab these lineman's pliers made by Snap-on and just pop them out. Frets are off, and I'm just going to take a 10mm socket and remove the tuners. These tuners are very easy to remove. You see I'm not even using a ratchet. They don't have to be in very, very, very tight. Just snug so they don't vibrate. This is something I've been wanting to do to this guitar for a couple of years now. It just took me this long to build up the nerve to actually tear into it like this. Because I have enjoyed playing it. It stays in tune pretty good up until that nut loosened up. So. Okay, the neck is all taken apart. I'm going to go ahead and pull the electronics. I'm really leaning towards just going ahead and completely refinishing the whole guitar and do the Danish oil finish on it. I think that's going to be the best bet. Still haven't made up my mind if I want to thicken the body yet, but I will know in just a few minutes. Completely torn apart now. All the frets are off, electronics and everything are out. Really leaning towards adding that thickness to the body since I have it down this far. There's a lot of finish work I have to do anyhow. I'm going to have to sand the back part of the neck off, and or the headstock rather. And the front part, I'm going to do my very best not to damage. I'd like to keep that lacquer there. I'd like to keep my logo and everything on it. So now the next thing is to try to get that fretboard off. I've never removed a fretboard before, and I've read and watched videos that you can use an iron to help loosen the glue. So we're going to get the iron out, heat this thing up, and see what happens. We got the iron heating up. I went ahead and covered the fretboard with the towel. I'm going to try heating it that way first, and then we'll see if we can't get that fretboard to lift, and see what happens. So just keep in mind, I'm definitely not a luthier. I'm sure you can tell that by now by looking at this. Built this guitar 10 years ago. It was my very first neck through guitar build. Since then I've built a couple more and have greatly improved. And I would like to have this up to that standard. So, got to get that fretboard fixed. So here goes nothing. We're going to try getting that iron on there and see if it'll lift. Okay, so I took the towel out and put a piece of paper in there. That's what I'm trying to do is prevent my wife's iron from getting damaged, from getting something stuck on the bottom of the iron. The glue is not exactly letting go very easily. But what I've discovered is I've been able to get this putty knife under it using this aluminum hammer. I can very gently tap it, and it seems to be working its way up underneath between the fretboard and the neck. We'll see what happens. Now that I've gotten the knife started up underneath the fretboard, keeping the iron sitting on it still, and I went and got a wider putty knife so I don't have to move the knife so much. I can just keep tapping it up underneath there, and it's nice and slow and steady. I don't want to get in a hurry and then end up damaging the neck. So just keep going at a nice slow steady pace and See if we can't get that fretboard off there. Using 2 putty knives now, and you can see the fretboard is starting to release. As I said before, it's a very slow process. Okay, so I got a good start going now. Fretboard looks like it's lifting off nicely. It took me a while to get it going. I ended up having to use a wood chisel to get back here. And it's still a little bit high right there, so I'm going to have to sand that down. But now I'm underneath the fretboard and it's just peeling right up now. So that's good to see. But the hard part was just getting it started. Now that it's heated up, also I put water in the iron so it's steaming. That seemed to help it a lot. But yeah, now it's just lifting right up. We're getting close to the end now. I'm worried about this part right there. That's where the fretboard is the thinnest. But if it breaks right there, it's not that big of a deal. I guess I can just sand it down. Anytime I run a sander across that, I run the risk of rounding it over, and I definitely do not want to round that over. You can see right here where it's raised a little bit. That's where I had difficulty getting up underneath the fretboard, so I definitely will have to sand that flat. Okay, removing the fretboard started releasing the scarf joint a little bit, so I'm going to have to add some glue in there and reclamp it, but it looks like it's going to seal down fairly easily. So I'm just going to pop that truss rod out. I couldn't get the truss rod out. I'm just going to leave it in there. It's not worth damaging the neck. I'm going to go ahead and repair the scarf joint right now. The good news is there was no actual damage to the scarf joint. The steam just was causing it to release. I was able to get plenty of glue up in there, and it glued up quite nicely, and I have plenty of squeeze out, so I know its glue is up in the joint. When that glue sets up, it'll be nice and strong. Okay, so I opted to use 2 clamps and some wood. Let me get some nice tight pressure on that and keep that scarf joint nice and closed. Very pleased with how nicely that fretboard came off of there, so there'll be very little sanding. And I'm definitely going to go ahead and do the Danish oil finish on it, because the sanding that I have to do on the neck is going to tear into the lacquer anyhow. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. Leaning more and more towards thickening the body. And a Morbid sander with 60 grit paper to do the initial sanding. Sanded the bare wood. I got to do a little bit more sanding farther up the neck after that scarf joint dries. But I'm gonna go ahead. I noticed that this line right here is a little bit crooked, and the best way to get this lacquer off here is just to hit it with a router. So I'm gonna go ahead and set a router up and clean those lines up. I'm not worried about the pickup cavities because that's covered with a bezel. But also this here needs to be cleaned up a little bit. If you're wondering what these little notches are here, that's where I had made a mistake early on in the build. I made a mistake on one of the holes, and so I decided to make the other one match. So it looked like I did it on purpose, and then I just filled them with lacquer. So I'm going to leave those alone. So I need to straighten this hole up, need to clean this out, and I need to deepen this just a smidgen. So I'm not going to be able to get a video of this, but I'm going to freehand this and try to clean that socket up. Okay, so it's all cleaned out, and that sits down in there nicely. Nice clean look. I'm going to go ahead and clean this line up now. And my son is here to grab the video. not going to push my luck go any farther. Now it's just time to clean up the rest of the cavity. So I have my thickness planer all ready to roll, and we're going to thin down the back of this to get down below this bevel so that I can add some more thickness to the guitar. But I have to have this gone first. Okay, so I have the back thinned out to the thickness that I think it would be okay. I can add to the body now, but what I have to do now is I have to just take the sander and clean it up a little bit. There's some gouges and stuff like that happen as a result of the planing, simply because the guitar is just a smidget too small for my planer. But that'll all be cleaned up when I do the final sanding, so you don't even know it even happened. So time to get sanding. So I cut, planed, and jointed several pieces of black walnut board that I will glue to the back, add the thickness that I need, and then I'll just simply cut off the excess once the glue dries. I need the exact location of the center line. That has got to be exactly right, or it won't look right. So I just got to find that line, and then I can do a glue up. And then once the glue up is done, take over to the bandsaw, cut off the excess, grab the router, use a flush cutting bit. I did a rough cut on the miter saw just to get the wood a little bit closer to the size that it's going to end up being. So go ahead and get ready to start doing the glue up. Okay, so I went ahead and I numbered the boards. I don't know if you can see it. This is number 4. This is number 3. So they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the location of the board, and I'm going to start applying glue and just glue a couple boards down and let it set, and then we'll glue a couple more down. So I can see a line right there, which is the actual center line of the guitar from the old joint. So I'm just going to line up with that, and then I'm going to mark with a pencil the location of that board. So you can see quite clearly where that location is. I'm going to apply some glue. Now I've seen several different woodworking videos and stuff where people say you don't need to have a whole lot of squeeze out. I'm not a master woodworker either, as you can probably tell. So if I over glue, it's my guitar. So far the original body in this has lasted for 10 years, and you saw how difficult it was for me to get the fretboard off. So I'm going to go ahead and apply some glue to the back of the board and get it glued into place. Very hard to do this one-handed. My son was here for long enough to do a little bit of recording for me, but he has since left. It doesn't need to be real thick because I do have glue on both pieces. So it's just my own OCD that makes me want to make sure that every inch is covered. Luthiers and woodworkers are probably going, Jeff, you don't need to do all of that. I want it to stay together. So put that in place. Apply a little bit of pressure. And we'll glue the next board, and then we'll clamp it up. Now these cavities are actually going to be really easy to locate. Because all I have to do is drill a hole from the other side. And then I can use the router flush bit. It's a lot easier if I use both hands. I'm trying to record and do a glue up at the same time. Put that into place. Then I need to grab a couple clamps and clamp this up. Okay, so we got the first 2 boards glued in place. Got to be a little inventive on how I clamped one of them, simply because there's no way to get a clamp around that area. I wanted to clamp solidly to the table for this particular glue up, because the table will prevent the top of the guitar from being damaged I don't care if the very back goes because there's gonna be a lot of sanding, belt sanding, because I gotta take probably about another 1/16 off of those boards simply by sanding, and that's gonna take some time. But the glue up went well. The joints are nice and tight, and looking forward to the next couple boards. I gotta give this a little bit of time for the glue to set up, and then I can glue a couple more boards in place. Well, the back is all glued on, clamped up. Now all I can do is just wait for the glue to dry.